Hello everybody, welcome to this afternoon's Speakers for Schools virtual talk. We're delighted you've been able to join us today. This session will last around 45 minutes and will include a presentation from our speaker before moving to student Q&A. Questions for today's speaker can be submitted via the Q&A function on the right hand side of your screen, and this will be open throughout the presentation for you to submit your questions. Unfortunately, we will not be able to answer all submitted questions. There is simply not enough time to answer them all, but rest assured we have received them. We're very excited to welcome this afternoon's speaker, Matt Brittin. Matt is the President for EMEA Business and Operations with Google and has kindly joined us this afternoon to discuss his life lessons and advice, his advice for preparing for the world of work and the ever-changing tech industry. Matt, hi, welcome to your first virtual talk.
Hello there, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Welcome to my house. Hope it's okay. Really good to see everybody. Thank you for tuning in.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being with us today. If you I think you have a short kind of talk to get us started, Matt, then we'll move to student Q&A.
Brilliant. Yes, very happy to do that. I've got some pictures to try to keep people entertained because the last thing you want to do is look at me for a long period of time. So I don't know whether you can see those or not. Can you see that?
They're all working well.
Okay, so this is what my house normally looks like. I've just moved into a smaller room for today. So my name's Matt Brittin, and my job is to look after Google and run how Google works across all the countries in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. I started at Google 13 years ago when I was very young. And when I started, my job was to run Google in the UK, hence the Big Ben. And we had about 200 people in the UK. Now we've got, I think, about 6,000 in the UK, about 40,000 across Europe, the Middle East and Africa, mostly European people, mostly from each country. So most of the Googlers in Britain are British, for example. And so it's been an amazing journey. What Google tries to do, I'm sure some of you will have used Google as a search engine or might enjoy YouTube or Google Translate or Google Maps. You might have a phone that's powered by Android. You might use Google Docs. These are all products that we build. And we want to, the mission of the company is all about making products that work for everyone and organizing the world's information and making it accessible for everyone and useful for everyone. That's at the heart of what Google does. It started at search, but that sort of approach underpins everything that we try to do as a company. Not sure if you'll remember this. This was a moment I think I will never forget. This is the Olympic Stadium in London in 2012. And as a Londoner and somebody who's enjoyed a bit of sport and competition, this was a moment that was magical to me. This is a house in which Tim Berners-Lee, Sir Tim, the founder and the inventor of the World Wide Web, was revealed to be, and around the stadium flashed up the words, "This is for everyone." So he invented the World Wide Web in 1989. He wrote a short memo. He was working at the Nuclear Research Center in Switzerland, CERN it was called. He wrote a memo envisaging a sort of network where anybody could put stuff on the network and anybody else could find it. And little did he know it would be so transformational for everyone. So that was 1989. And in 1989, I'm old enough that was when I was graduating from university. And so at the point I graduated from university, this thing hadn't even been made a reality. It was an idea on a piece of paper in a research laboratory in Switzerland. And yet for the last 20 years, I've worked in jobs that have depended upon the existence of this invention completely. And Google wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the World Wide Web, nor would all the other tech companies and products that you use and enjoy today in the palm of your hand in your smartphone. Last year, we reached the point, what Tim calls the 50-50 moment, the point where half the planet is online for the first time. So half of the people on the planet haven't yet had the opportunity that most of you've had to access all the world's information, the entertainment, the games, the apps, the information and knowledge that you and I take for granted every day. So a lot of what I spend my time doing now is thinking about how do we get all of this amazing technology to the next 50% of people on the planet, the 50-50 moment. So it's a big moment as everybody gets online for the first time. When I started at Google in 2007, I was trying to figure out what the company was all about and how to play my part. And I remember going to a meeting and there were about 10 or 12 people in this room, all sat around the table. Everybody had laptops. That's how tech companies seem to work. And at some point in the meeting, I was saying, well, why can't we do this? It doesn't seem complicated. It doesn't seem like rocket science. There was one very quiet guy in the corner of the room, and he just looked up and rolled his eyes and looked down again. And that was the only thing he did in the whole meeting. And at the end of it, I said, what's the story with that guy? Did I say something wrong? And I was told that this guy was actually a rocket scientist. And so I got to know him later and said, like, how come, you're a rocket scientist and you've come to work at Google? And he said, well, I was working in an area of rocket science, which was all about computer science. And the two key textbooks that I relied upon were written by people who were working at Google. So I felt like if I went to work at Google, I'd really learn from the best in my field of computer science. And so at Google, there are sort of people who are engineers, computer scientists, and they build the product, and they're really the rock stars. And then there's everyone else, and I'm one of the everyone else people. So my job is to try to help those products to land in every country where we operate and to really work for the people in that country, whether it is South Africa or Spain. And whether you're somebody who uses digital tools and technology all the time, or you're my mother who's 86 and has only just got into video calling during the pandemic. So I want to really make things that work for everyone, and having people who are really good at technology is a really important part of that. We also have YouTube, which I guess I hope that many of you find useful, maybe for learning things for school and life, as well as for entertaining yourself and sharing and posting your own videos as well. This is one of those amazing things that just keeps growing and growing, and has completely changed the way we connect with information and entertainment. Anyone now with a smartphone can broadcast themselves and reach half the population of the planet. Anyone can look up how to do something and find somebody who's often not a celebrity or an authority on something, but just is enthusiastic about something. I remember when one of my sons was about 8, he really wanted to learn how to be a goalkeeper at football. And I was terrible at ball sports. More on that story later. And so I felt like, well, I needed to help him. So we went onto YouTube while we were standing in a field, and we found a video by an American soccer coach who just made videos about how to take goal kicks. And both of us went from being really terrible at taking goal kicks, watching the video perhaps 14 or 15 times over the course of 2 hours. At the end of that 2-hour period, we could take goal kicks. And I'm sure you've had experience like that. So that might seem normal to you, but for most people who have not grown up in a YouTube era, the idea that you could learn something from somebody like you, you're never going to meet, who's based halfway around the world in that kind of way, is really changed everything. And so I think, what we see on YouTube is billions of videos every day now on how to do stuff that are being used to learn things, as well as, all the fun entertainment videos, music videos that you'd expect. We had a talk at work just the other day from Arcala, who I guess you'll know, rap artist, but also brilliant at explaining what's happened historically on racism. He's written a book called Natives, which is all about Britain and our sort of racist past and the role of empire there. And he was talking about how today, people can become famous. He's got people he knows, and he himself has become famous partly through things like YouTube, allowing them to build an audience without all the middle people, and generally it was middlemen, getting in the way and trying to tell them to be like this, be like that. You can only get on TV if you do these things. That kind of really has opened up opportunity for lots of people to tell their stories and to connect with audiences. And I guess that's one of the things I love about the technology, and one of the reasons I really enjoy working in the role that I do, is because for me it's not so much about the technology, it's about how people use it in ways you'd never expect to express themselves and to create businesses, whether it's as a YouTube star, but many small businesses use the internet to export, to sell to people around the world, and to grow sales and to create jobs and opportunity and to become more prosperous. And I think that's one of the things I'm really inspired by every day. This microphone reminds me about Google Translate, which is probably my favorite Google product. You may have used Translate, maybe as you're learning a language, or maybe as you're, if you had the opportunity to travel in those days before COVID when we could travel. Google Translate is now asked to translate over 150 billion words a day, 150 billion words a day, into hundreds of different, or 156, I think, different languages. It works better and better all the time. It's powered by machine learning, which means the more people use it, the more it gets better. Machine learning means that it can be made available on lower and lower cost devices using less and less data, because the intelligence means it uses less functionality, less memory, less bandwidth to deliver better results over time. So it's a brilliant product. It's a free product. And it's one of those products that's all about building bridges between people, not putting up walls between people, which I kind of feel is important at this time on this planet. And if you ask what are the three most common phrases that Google Translate is asked to translate across those 150 billion words, they are "how are you," "thank you," and "I love you." And I guess that, you know, reminds me that people are fundamentally good people who care about each other and want to break down barriers of language and culture to connect with each other. Now think about career and what's important in the world of work. This is my first job. When I was at school at 15, I worked in the holidays in a warehouse which was supplying Sainsbury's. And you had to go around and pick up various numbers of cans of different food and so on, like you can see here, put them into pallets and send them off to different supermarkets. As my first experience of the world of work, it was kind of interesting for the first half day, but I found it quite tough work. It's quite heavy lifting, and you had to really move quite fast to complete the target amount of work every day. And then I remember coming back a year later and helping again the following Christmas holidays. And I realized that most of the people that had been there the previous year were still there. And I thought, crikey, I don't know that I want to be doing that job every day, 365 days a year in that way. So that made me think about what I did want to do in the world of work. Now, oddly enough, I just finished last week being on the board of Sainsbury's, which I've been doing for 9 years. And that's about helping the company to think about how to continue to be successful and grow and develop over time. And I would never have thought when I was working in the warehouse that I might one day be in the boardroom. And so the person on the board of Sainsbury's who's had the most experience of working at Sainsbury's, although there was a bit of a gap between age 15 and age about 39. So that's when I kind of started and realized about hard work and the range of things that you could do in work. It's hard to understand what the future of work is going to be like. It's definitely the case that technology is changing it. It's also the case, I think, that the last few months have really shifted us forward. So you think about the pandemic, imagine what it would have been like living in lockdown without the lifeline of online. It would have been a very, very different experience. And obviously, personally, we've all found that, being connected to our friends, being able to find things to entertain us, keep us amused, teach us how to have a haircut, whatever it is you've been doing online. But it's also been a lifeline for many, many businesses. So for the first time, lots of businesses have moved everybody to working from home, and it's turned out to be possible. Lots of small retailers or restaurants have had to go to being delivery only or pick up from the curb. And at Google, we've really tried to help support them in doing that. And I think what we've seen is over the last 3 months, we've maybe leapt forward 3 or 4 years in terms of our use of digital technology to run businesses and to ensure that people can continue to hopefully be in employment. So I think what we're going to see is digital technology at the heart of how people do business and at the heart of jobs for the future. And so we can't be certain about the future of work. Some of the things I think are going to be important in the future of work are curiosity. You know, being curious about what's going on and why. How are people doing this? And one of the things digital gives you a chance to do is really understand what is it people care about. Looking at tools like Google Trends, you can see what are the patterns of searches for different things. And in lockdown, you might have seen this. We published data that was based on anonymous data. When you use Google Maps, it knows you know, where you are and where you were looking to go. And that data, when we collate it up, you can show you patterns of movement. So you could see in lockdown what happened to, you know, where people were traveling to. So that kind of insight can be useful in the case of lockdown for public health officials, but in the case of looking at search patterns over time, if you're a shop selling, I don't know, cycling, clothing and shoes, you can see where in the world are people looking for these clothes. Or if you're a fashion retailer or a designer, you can see what are the hot designs that you need to be making more of, what's selling well, what's not selling well. So lots of stuff that you can do with those kinds of digital tools. This is a terrible picture of me when I was at university. I was the first in my family to go to university, and oddly I ended up going to Cambridge. And the reason I went to Cambridge was only because I got into a sport called rowing. And the only reason I got into rowing was because I was rubbish at running and I was rubbish at ball sports. People used to laugh at me when I tried to play football or cricket, but I was quite big, and rowing's a sport which likes big people, and where you are taught exactly how to move, and that suited me down to the ground. Because I got successful at rowing, I was inspired to kind of try and go to a place where I could continue rowing all the time, and I went to Cambridge just because it seemed like they had a good standard of rowing. Although when I went there, I rowed in the university boat race against Oxford. You might have seen that, and I came second 3 times in a row, which isn't a great result. 3 silver medals sounds good, but not when there's only 2 people competing. But I would say that one of the things that I've seen in my career is that you can learn from everywhere. And lots of the stuff I learned from rowing, I find really useful every day. So the sort of self-discipline, working as a team. This is me with the British 8 competing in the World Championships with the Germans just behind us. Learning to have a goal, work together hard, complement each other, dealing with the ups and downs and successes and failures. All of these things I learned much more from sport than I ever did from school or university. And I think it's really important to think about how broadly you learn when you are thinking about the world of work and what you want to be able to do. Sometimes you have tough days. This is me being grilled by the UK Select Committee in Parliament about various things to do with tax and data, and answering some tough questions on that. It's not always an easy day at work, and sometimes you don't really know what to do. But I think one of the things that I've learned is that you can learn from every experience, and being asked tough questions really makes you think about what you're doing and what you want to do, what you're good at and what you should change. And I think that's one of the things I've valued in the last few years. So even when days are confusing, it's important to think about how you can improve and get better and what you can learn from those experiences. And I mentioned the pandemic. And, you know, one of the things that is happening right now is countries are unlocking. We're seeing this in the UK, and it's going some places okay, some places, Leicester at the moment is struggling a bit. And it's very clear that it's going to be quite tough times, not just from a health standpoint, but actually for the economy. So last week, we launched a pledge to try to train 10 million people and businesses across Europe, the Middle East and Africa to help them to find jobs, to improve their digital skills, to digitize and grow. Because we can see that thing about we've leapt forward several years. If businesses are going to be successful coming out of the lockdown, they're going to need to be better at digital. And I think digital skills are not just for people building apps or IT professionals, they're for everyone. Digital is really part of what we all do today. You've grown up as digital natives, it's always been part of your lives, and recognizing that it's a toolkit that can allow you to help reach audiences, build customers, grow businesses, and create value is really important. So I think, you know, the curiosity that you have about the world around you, creativity about like drawing ideas from everywhere. You can access ideas from all around the world in the palm of your hand in your smartphone, and collaborating with each other to do something amazing which allows you to contribute and find something where you're playing to your strengths and you get better as you go and you really feel that you're making a difference and it's rewarding. So those are some of the things that I've observed and learned in my time working in technology over the last 13 years at Google. And longer working in this sort of in this industry. So those are the things I wanted to say, just to give you a bit of a picture of what I've been doing and how random it is. I think I never knew what the next thing was going to be. When I started in that warehouse, I had absolutely no idea. When I went to university, I was only interested in the sport. When I graduated from university, I didn't know the internet existed, and yet for the last 20 years, I've worked in jobs that depended on that invention. So you can't really plan things well. I think the things that I'd say is learning from everywhere, curiosity, creativity, and collaboration are the things that I think are going to be really important. in the coming years and decades for people like you, if you want to have a productive and happy and fulfilling work life over time. So I think that's all I was going to say by way of prepared things. So very happy to take any questions if there are any.
That's great. Thank you so much. We definitely have lots of questions submitted, Matt. Just a quick note for the students who are tuning in. We have had close to 150 questions submitted already, so do keep them coming, but rest assured we're not going to get to all of them, be able to get to all of them today. So just thinking about your own journey in your career, Matt, and we'll focus these questions on that in the first instance. One of our students had clearly done their homework and had submitted this before you mentioned rowing at all, which is great. And they mentioned you represented Great Britain in the World Rowing Championships, is that right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So why didn't you become a sportsman? Was that something you ever thought about, or was that something that you just, I guess, didn't decide to go into?
Well, that's a very kind question. I wanted to be an Olympic gold medalist, and I wasn't good enough. And I was nearly good enough. I got a silver and bronze medals at the World Championships, but never an Olympic medal, never Olympic gold. But I do have friends who did. And I was a rower when we weren't quite as good as we are now. But also, you couldn't be a full-time athlete in those days. Only, well, Steve Redgrave, you might have heard of, who won 5 Olympic gold medals. He was about the only athlete on the team who could get enough sponsorship to be a full-time athlete. So it's changed a bit with lottery funding, and it's great to see Britain doing better at sport. And I would love to have been a full-time athlete, but I didn't have the talent or the money. You know, I've hopefully channeled that energy and drive into other things.
Fantastic. And so just thinking about that, would you say that resilience was important in your kind of early career as well, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I mentioned. You know, I learned a lot from sport that stands me in really good stead. And one of the things you learn in sport is how to deal with not going so well. So I mentioned, you know, I was actually really successful at school. We kind of won everything, and we were like super successful as a school crew. And then I went to Cambridge and I rode in the boat race against Oxford, and it was on TV, and there were like helicopters and cameras, and everybody watched it, and we got beaten. And I really didn't like that feeling at all. And it's still painful if I think about it now, but you do learn from your successes and your failures, probably more from failure than success, I'd say.
Fantastic. One of our students here, Freya, has asked, is there something that you learned later in your career that you wish you had learned earlier?
Oh, well, there's a good question. Thank you, Freya. I mean, I guess, and this probably sounds like a dad answer, but I think as you get older, you maybe realise that you don't have to do everything all at once, and you don't have to be in quite so much of a hurry. You know, sometimes there's just, you know, a period of time which is just going to take time for you to go through something and learn something. And I definitely have always been impatient, like want the next thing, want to do something new, want to kind of crack something. And sometimes it just takes time. And I think allowing yourself a bit of time and a bit of a break sometimes to kind of develop and change is a good thing. So I think if I could have a conversation with my younger self, I might say, you know, don't worry, slow down a little bit. I think also, like, life is a journey about figuring out who you are, what you're good at, what you're not good at, what gives you energy, what drains your energy. And so experimenting a bit, and, you know, I went and worked in real estate in the early part of my career because they liked sports people, and it meant that I could go training in the morning, and then I could get into work, do a bit of work. I could go and have a quick sleep in the toilet and nobody would notice. And then I could leave early because they loved sports people. But I was terrible at that work. I didn't have any interest in it, and I found it really boring, and I wasn't very good at it. So I do think that, you know, trying different things is a way of figuring out a bit more who you are, where you get your energy, and what you're going to be good at. So don't be afraid of trying different stuff, and it doesn't always have to work out.
Fantastic, what wonderful advice. And one of our students has asked this question. If we need to come back to it later, that's absolutely fine. And they've asked, what childhood book inspired you?
Oh my God. Well, I don't know. I tell you what, I was inspired as a child by Doctor Who, which is not a book but a TV show. And so I was a bit nerdy. And in those days, it was really not cool to be nerdy at all. And it maybe is a bit more now, I don't know. But what I liked about that show was it was about a character that was trying to solve difficult things by not through violence and guns, but by being witty and quick and eccentric. And I suppose I felt like I quite like that sort of outlook on life. And you know, it's a show that they kind of, the BBC made. They parked it for a few years and then they brought it back about 15 years ago when my kids were just 4 and 5 years old. So I've enjoyed watching it with them. So that's probably one that kind of had an impact on me.
Fantastic, thank you. Nick has asked, what is it like working at Google?
Well, that's a good question. I'd say that Google, and probably in common with other sort of tech companies, tries to be very collaborative and creative and sort of fast moving. It's a company where we try not to have too much hierarchy or process or sort of structure that gets in the way. So, I mean, literally just before joining you, I was on a call with colleagues from about 400 colleagues from across loads of different countries, and you get asked every question on any topic. And we do the same thing with our CEO. So anybody can ask the CEO of Google or me, you know, running the large region, any question that they want. And I think that helps to kind of make it not very stuffy. People feel that the leaders are accountable. It's fun. It's fast moving. I really like what we do and believe that what we do is good for the world. There's always problems. You often get criticism, but I think that I really enjoy it because of that pace and that creativity. Lots of young people and lots of diversity of backgrounds. I mean, actually, technology can do better on diversity, particularly in engineering. It doesn't have enough women, and also actually in terms of race diversity. So we're just talking about this. You know, we don't have enough Black people, in particular, in engineering and in Europe. And there's much more we need to do on those things, because ultimately we're trying to build products that work for everyone, like I said, and that means you probably need them to be built by everyone. And so that's one of the things that we need to work on. So great culture, really fast, really creative, and a good sort of purpose, but always stuff you can improve.
Fantastic, thank you. We've had a few questions that link to what it's like working at Google. One very popular question is, do you actually work in the Google offices, and what are they like? Because apparently they are very fancy.
Well, I'm not sure about that. When we first started, almost all offices were kind of grey and boring. You didn't really see people having personal stuff in their offices. And Google had this sort of quirky idea that, you know, offices should be kind of fun. So we used to paint them bright colours, and we would encourage people to personalise their space, which so kind of seems obvious now. But, you know, Google Office sort of looks like where I am now. It's colourful. You've got, you know, things that make you smile or inspire. There's usually quite a lot of Lego. I've got some Lego here because people like to build stuff. So it's sort of playful kind of environment. And it, you know, I always say to people from other companies who come in and go, oh, wow, it's so cool here. Well, it's like, it doesn't cost you any more to make an office somewhere that people want to be. Mainly the way to do that is ask people, like, how would you like your office to be? And then let them have their office like that. So I think also, like, the working environment is likely to change, partly due to the coronavirus stuff. And I think people are realizing that you can work from home. There's probably going to be much more flexibility in how people work over time. And I think that's a good thing, because, you know, different types of work, you want to be in different types of environments. Sometimes you need to be somewhere quiet. Sometimes you need to be with lots of colleagues to try to kind of solve a problem or create something new. So a bit more flexibility is good.
That's great. Thank you so much. We've had a lot of questions from students here, all related to their kind of future careers. Of course, students are at home at the moment, not largely in school right now, and are thinking about, you know, their post-16, post-18 journeys, I guess. So one of our students has asked, is it good to start coding at a young age, and do you think coding skills are important?
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't have coding skills, and so you can still work in technology if you aren't a computer scientist or a coder. But I think if you have interest and a bit of talent in that area, then yes, absolutely. There's a range of things you can do, and I wouldn't sort of suggest, you know, that I'm an expert in any of those areas, but I definitely think if you're interested in it, then it's really good to be coding, creating things, building apps, you know, just trying out what you can do. You may have people you know who you can help, you know, doing coding in a way that can actually help, I don't know, for example, a business run their website better, improve the checkout process for customers and so on, can be really helpful, because then that's a skill set that you can actually turn into a career. So I'd really encourage you, if you are interested, you have the time, you have the talent to do it, then absolutely do it. But equally, technology businesses needs lots of people, need people who understand how to do marketing, how to show people how to use complicated products and make them feel happy and comfortable doing it. They need business people to go and do deals and make sure we make money so that you can pay the staff. You need lawyers, you need all kinds of people. So I'd say, you know, figuring out who you are, what you're good at, and then investing in those areas, that's the right thing to do. If coding and building things with computer science appeals to you and you've got some talent there, please do that, because I think that is a great skill set to have over time.
Fantastic. I think that really helps one of our students here, Amy, who asked, I want to work in maths when I'm older. Do you use maths regularly in different jobs at Google? And I guess there are jobs where maths will be much more useful than in others, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, like, I would never criticise teachers because it's an incredibly tough job, as many parents have learned over the last few months. But I do think that we have this sort of stigma associated to maths where people think they can either do maths or not do maths. And like in life, you definitely need to have some basic numeracy. And every job, I think, you know, you basically need to be somewhat comfortable with numbers, even if it's just roughly estimating things or looking at the cost of something or the fees for something or whatever. But I think, you know, if you have an aptitude for maths and you feel more comfortable about it, then there are loads of things that you can do. I don't know many jobs where you need like advanced calculus. Actually, a friend of mine who's like a maths genius, he showed me something the other day, which is like a curve of like what you learn in maths over time. And it starts off with, you know, counting and then addition, subtraction, then bid maths, then it gets into geometry and then calculus and then advanced calculus. And then it says, you know, and then at this point you get a job and what you need to do is put numbers in a box in a spreadsheet. And there kind of is a bit of that for most jobs. But I think there are so many opportunities you have if you're really numerous and you can think about like financial careers. So this guy, the maths genius, became a chief financial officer. He went on to become a chief executive officer running a big cable and TV company. And so he was really successful using that numeracy skill set, but then becoming broader as a business person.
Excellent, thank you so much. Imran has asked, what advice would you give to someone who's trying to work in an innovative tech company in terms of, one, finding jobs, and two, making sure you have the right skills for those jobs as well? Yeah,
it's a good question. I think like the first thing to do would be go to your favorite search engine and search for jobs at X, where X is whatever companies you think you're interested in. And what you'll find there is that, you know, all tech companies post their job listings and tell you what they're looking for, including skills. So, and it sounds dumb, but it's quite a good place to start, is just actually looking at what people are looking for. And, you know, are they looking for people who can code in different languages? Are they looking for people who've got work experience? If so, what? Are they recruiting graduates? Are they recruiting school leavers? So that's a really, really helpful thing to do. I think the second thing is think about what you like. So maybe there are sort of technologies and products that you really enjoy using yourself. Like, what's your point of view on those products? Would you like to work for that company? If you were to go along to talk to somebody who works in a tech company or try to sort of think about how you get a job there, they'd want you to have a point of view on their products and services. So it's always good to be a real user of those sorts of products and have a point of view on what does, you know, how does Google search work versus another search engine? What do you think of TikTok compared with YouTube? Why are they different? Who are they for? Why? So getting curious about those things, I think, gets you into those sorts of conversations well.
Wonderful, thank you. So just thinking, if students were about to kind of have an interview or submit a CV to work in an organisation like Google, how would they be able to demonstrate their creativity and stand out? That's a question that one of our students have submitted.
So I think that's a really good question. It does depend a bit on the size of company and how their recruiting processes work. I think something like Google, you know, we're in a really fortunate position. We get lots of people applying to work for us. So there's a sort of fairly structured process to try to ensure that we look at everybody who applies in a consistent way, and we're fair to try to bring in people from all kinds of different backgrounds. And then at some point, you know, it gets to an interview. But lots of companies, there are a few steps before interviews, and that can be quite frustrating because you feel like if only they'd meet me, they'd know that I was great. But companies do that for a reason. It's because they think that those processes work for them. I think I'd go back to what I was just saying. Like, there's no substitute for having a point of view on the company, why you like it, what you think is good, and what's not. Like, it's a really bad interview when you start by asking somebody, so, so which of our products do you use? What would you improve? And they can't really answer. And you think, well, okay, you haven't put that much effort into preparing for this, so I'm not sure how much effort you put in if you were to work here. There's a little bit of that. So researching the company, researching its competitors, having a point of view on stuff. Nobody expects you to be an expert in everything. And I think the other thing is, we're human, and we connect with other people as people first and foremost. So it might sound really basic, but how you show up, the way you make eye contact, being able to communicate somewhat confidently, looking people in the eye, being friendly. These things actually do count for a lot in making that human connection, as well as then having some things to talk about that are relevant. And also being honest. You're not trying to be somebody you're not. When you're trying to get a job, although you want the job, if you're pretending to be somebody that's different from you because you think that's what they want, mostly people will see through that and think there's something weird here. But if they don't, you then get a job and have to then pretend for day in, day out, week in, week out, that you're something that you're not. So it's important to be true to yourself and authentic, I think, in these processes. But also just go and get experience. Like, one of my sons is just left school, and he's hoping to go to university in September if university's open. And he was trying to get work in the lockdown. And he was filling in loads of forms and finding it frustrating. And I sort of said to him, why don't you just write out a CV and go to any shop around the corner which you think you'd be interested in working in. And it was really hard, the first one he did. And then after a couple, he got comfortable with going into people and saying, hey, I'm Nick, I'm looking for some work, here's what I can do. And he found he really enjoyed it. And he got like 3 offers within 24 hours to come in for a trial to work in a bar or whatever. But that was a great experience. And it doesn't really matter, like my job in a warehouse, that doesn't define what I do today at all. But just getting started is so important. So I did really encourage that. Go and try and start to have those conversations.
Absolutely. And in fact, one of our students here, Nishan, has asked, how was your first job interview, Matt?
God, I can't remember. I can't remember the Sainsbury's job interview. I think it was just like, can you pick up this can of pilchards kind of thing. But yeah, I've had a few interviews over time which I found difficult and challenging. And I suppose a couple of things I'd say, I remember feeling really nervous, and that thing where you feel like you break out in a cold sweat and you're not sure you've answered the question right, but afterwards being made a job offer in one instance. And I think what it taught me was that you've got so much attention on yourself in these things that you don't really know how you're coming across. So I've always tried since that moment to think, actually, what I need to do is pay attention to the other person and not worry so much about me, but am I answering their question? What is it they're asking exactly, and so on. So I've tried to do some of that. So yes, they can be kind of squirmy experiences. One thing I would say to you is, if you have family friends who have any experience of interviewing or hiring people, it's really good to ask to have a practice. So a friend of mine the other day, well, the daughter of a friend of mine just got in touch and said, hey, I've got an interview with a company, could I just give you a call? I said, sure. I'm really happy to help, because all of us have been at that stage at some point, right? And I remember people kind of being helpful to me, and just having a practice with somebody you know a bit, but who can give you a bit of a real experience. I think that's really helpful.
Absolutely, thank you. One of our students here, Saharsh, has asked, do you have any tips on how our audience can be better leaders?
Wow. Well, it's probably a bit early to be a leader of a large thing, but maybe some of you already have experience of being a leader, maybe in a sports team, maybe in like music or a drama group, or some of the things that you've had the chance to do at school. And actually, like I said in my little talk, those things count for a lot, actually. Another thing I think you can do is just look at leaders you admire. And it could be people you know, or it could be people, through the media, and try to think about what is it that you really admire about them. Why does that kind of particularly affect you? And I think that can be really helpful. Like, I've always admired people who can communicate really well. I think that's something that I find inspiring, and it doesn't really matter whether I like them. Sometimes it could be a politician. but I've always been inspired by different ways of communicating and telling stories. So that kind of interests me. So I look at those sorts of people. So I just encourage you, think about who you really like, who's a leader. What is it that you find they're good at, and are there some things you could learn there?
Wonderful advice. Thank you so much. We did have a few questions submitted from students about the kind of future of the technology industry. We have a couple of minutes left, so I'll try and fit in a couple of questions here. Ben has asked, how much do you think AI will have an impact on our future?
It's a great question, Ben. Yeah, I mean, I think AI, like if you use Google Search or Gmail or YouTube or Google Maps, you're already using AI. Language, voice recognition. In fact, by saying that, I've triggered my phone to now start opening up and doing a Google search for something, I think. So it just shows you it's not perfect, but this technology is working better and better and better. And I think that all AI does, or machine learning does, is it helps people have smarter tools. And so Google Translate I used as an example, is a great example. We can now basically communicate with anyone else on the planet without having to learn a language. We can now read a newspaper from Bangladesh, in English if we don't speak the local language, pretty accurately. So I think those kinds of things are going to change a lot. I do think it's going to change jobs. We've done some work and research on this. I think we reckon that in Europe about 90 million jobs are going to change such that you're going to need some new skills within the jobs. So lots of things which take lots of time today might well speed up. Just like if I go back to, when my parents are in work, automation in things like dishwashers, like having a dishwasher at home saves you probably 2 hours a day, right? So there'll be lots of things in jobs where suddenly things that took you 2 hours will take you no time at all. So that means you might need new skills. And then I also think that some jobs might sort of go away altogether over time because they just become obsolete. Exactly which jobs? Well, who can say? But I think we're going to see a lot of change. This machine learning stuff is really taking off. It's not sinister. It's just making smarter tools that help us make better predictions, spot patterns better, and so on. So, for example, we use some machine learning technology in our data centers. So to host YouTube or to run Google Search, we have big data centers, big sheds full of computers, and we used machine learning to massively save us cooling costs in those data centers. That kind of thing is going to make a difference in the future as well.
Fantastic. And time for one final question from Murray. And that question is, what year do you think everyone around the globe will be connected to the World Wide Web?
Great question. It's hard to predict, but I think probably 5 to 7 years' time, if things go well and if the global economy isn't too badly impacted, we ought to be able to see that kind of thing. And I think that's a time of huge benefit. And actually, for all of you, even though the next few months are going to be uncertain, maybe the next couple of years are going to be uncertain, there really has never been a better time to be an entrepreneur and to be creative, because you can connect now with 4 billion people. You'll be able to connect with 8 billion people within 5 or 6 or 7 years' time. And the ideas that they have, the opportunity for them to be your customers or your fans or your collaborators, that was never there even when I was at school, and certainly is only really becoming a reality now. So it's a great time to be an entrepreneur. It's a great time to kind of be starting to get into the world of work and technology, even though it might be a bit bumpy in the coming months.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Matt. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. Huge thank you for joining us this afternoon. And I think those 3 kind of skills and traits you mentioned, I'm going to see if I get these correct: creativity, curiosity, and collaboration. I think. I think hopefully something that our students will really be able to take away from this talk and to think about their futures and future roles and careers and jobs. So thank you so much for making the time to be with us today. And for those of you in the audience, we have shared a feedback form in the Q&A thread. It'd be wonderful if you could complete that. We've also shared the colour for today's talk. Don't forget, you'll only need that if you've been asked by your school or college to complete the student activity sheet. Matt, once again, thank you so much, and we hope everyone.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone. Good luck.